Okay, so for this tutorial we're going to choose the Ferrari GT3 data pack as driven by Rens Broekman, and we're going to choose week 6, which will load up the session details where you can see the stint data. So if you've got a teammate that's driven a practice session and you weren't able to be there, you can look on VRS and you can see the lap times that they've done, and you can more importantly see the setup development that they've done and the changes that they've made and why they've made those changes. So that's what we're going to try and look at now in Rens's session here. So for the first stint there is no setup information given because there is nothing to be changed from, but I can tell you that it's likely that Rens will have loaded a setup based on an existing circuit that he feels is well suited to, in this case, Phillip Island, which is obviously a very fast circuit with high speed flowing corners, so you'll want a decent high speed balance and grip and also good top speed as well. So we'll just have a look at the second stint, which is where things get more interesting, because we can see that Rens has already started to make changes to the setup. So we can see here that he has increased the rear ride height by a couple of millimeters. He's also changed the gearing from short to standard, which is slightly longer than short, and he's decreased the rear wing. Now there are some extra additional changes shown here, but a few of these, such as the caster and the spring perch offsets, are really just in effect of the desired changes. So Rens will have wanted to increase the rear ride height by shortening the spring perch offsets, which will have subsequently lowered the caster slightly as well. So really what he's tried to do there by increasing the rear ride height is increase the rate and move the center of pressure, the center of downforce, further forwards in the car to give him more front high speed grip. In addition, he's actually decreased the rear wing, which will give him more top speed, less drag, but it will even further increase that front movement in terms of the balance shift in high speed corners. So he's really going to have a lot less rear grip than with the previous version of the setup, especially in the high speed corners. So we'll scroll down. We can see that he did one flying lap in this stint, and it's quite a lot slower than the previous lap of 1 minute 30.1. So I would guess that he made a mistake there. He might have gone a bit too far with the setup changes and found the car a little bit tricky to drive. So we'll go to the next one. We can see that he's just made the one change this time. He has increased the number of front anti-roll bar blades, so effectively increasing the front roll stiffness. So this will actually increase the weight transfer or the load transfer between the two front tyres, therefore reducing the grip at the front relative to the rear in terms of mechanical grip in the middle of the corner. So hopefully that mechanical understeer that he will have added with this anti-roll bar change will balance out the aero changes that he'll have made. So he clearly wants a better balance while still maintaining that top speed, because he didn't want to increase the rear wing back to what it was. And you can see here that he's done a faster lap. This is the fastest lap of the session so far. And he's done another stint without any changes. He's improved his lap times. He's done a 29.9 again, followed by a 29.7. So looking good. Now for the next stint, he has reverted back to the short gearing. So he was on the longer standard gearing, and he's now reverted back to the short. So effectively, I guess he wants better acceleration, and he feels like the gears don't quite match the corners as well as he wants to. You can see that he's consistently now doing 0.7s, which is similar to what he did before, but he's able to consistently do that now. We'll go to the next one. Now he's made a host of more changes here. Let's try and understand this a bit better. Now the ride height is showing as being changed, but in reality it's pretty much the same, but the spring perch offset is radically different. Now the reason for that is he has changed the spring rate. So he's really stiffened the front springs, which will have increased the ride height, and he's had to increase the spring perch offset to lower the front of the car in response to the stiffer front springs. He's also slightly decreased the rear camber, which will ever so slightly improve low speed traction and braking from the rear end of the car. He's also increased the rear spring rates, slightly less than the front though, so mechanically he will have added a bit more understeer or reduced some of the mechanical oversteer, and he's further decreased the rear wing setting, so a bit more top speed but even less rear grip at high speed, and that's pretty much it. So obviously it's a symmetrical change, so we've got a copy of the changes for both sides of the car, and looks like again that might have been a little bit tricky to drive because he wasn't able to do a decent lap. He's 4 or 5 seconds off the pace here. So we'll go and look at the next stint where he's made some more changes. So he's increased the camber back to what it was. Presumably that gives him the same confidence that he was looking for in the high speed corners, where the car would be loaded up in the middle of the corner. He will have sacrificed some slight traction in doing that, and we can see that he's lowered the rear ride height quite radically. So if we go back up so the rear ride height increased quite drastically with the increase in spring rates, and I think Rens might have forgot to adjust the rear ride height, and that's why the car was very, very tricky to drive. So he's obviously reset the rear ride height now back down to the height that it should be. The rake has been restored back to what it was with the softer springs. Ride heights all reset basically, but we just got stiffer springs all round. And what has he done this time? He's done a 0.7 again. We have seen him do a 0.7 previously and a 0.9 as well. So kind of hit and miss. Not really sure if this is a beneficial change. So we can see in the next stint he reverts back to the original spring rates. He's gone back to the softer starting spring rate of 180 newtons per millimeter, and I don't think that anything else has been changed. So we can see obviously the ride heights have been reset, and he's back into the pretty similar lap time, so no real progress here. He's just really reverted back. So for stint 9 now, obviously this was quite a long session. He's made a host of other changes. He's actually increased the setting on the traction control. Now this actually allows a little bit more slip with a larger number. So he's obviously feeling like the traction control is intervening too much on the number 1 setting, which has the most support. He has decreased the camber again. The rear ride height has gone up drastically. So he's obviously trying stiffer springs again on the rear, but this time he has increased the rear wing setting. So now he's trying a little bit more of a grippy aerodynamic setup in general, so stiffer springs and a higher wing setting. So he should have decent grip, especially through the high speed corners with this setup. And we can see this time he does improve, so he's now done a 29.5 as a result of those changes. That is assuming that he's driving consistently each time he heads out onto the track. Okay, so stint 10 now, we can see that he's changed the rear differential. So he's reduced the number of clutch plates from 5 to 3. So one wheel will be able to more freely rotate independently of the other. So what that's going to effectively do is allow slightly more free rotation into the corner, off the throttle especially, but then as he gets onto the throttle, the relaxed relationship will allow more stability and should make controlling the car on the throttle a little bit easier. So we can see he's not actually completed a lap here. He's gone out to do another stint without any changes, and he's done a much better lap time. So really that differential change probably wasn't that significant. He's just done a really good lap, and it was helpful as well. So he's done a 29.08 this time, which is really starting to get quite quick. So we can see Some further rear ride height adjustments, ever so slightly lower rear ride height here, but he's not completed this stint. Stint 13, what are we looking at here? We've got, again, even lower rear ride heights. So less rake overall should in theory give you better top speed, but also potentially move the downforce center rearwards, giving you less oversteer at high speed, or more understeer depending on how you look at it. He's also increased the rear camber, and he's decreased the toe in. So reducing the rear toe in will actually allow the car to rotate better on throttle, rather than having more toe in, which will increase stability in general. And we can see here he's done a pretty decent lap time again at 29.2. Go down to the next stint. This time he's messing with the differential again. He's gone from 100 Newton meters to 90, so a slight reduction in the preload. Basically the preload is the minimum torque required between the two driven wheels for the differential to not be fully locked. So if the torque is less than 90 Newton meters, then it acts like a completely locked differential. And the lower the number, again, the freer the car will be off the throttle, and the easier to drive on the throttle it will be as well, because it will allow independent rotation. So he obviously wants the car to be more predictable and stable on the throttle, but is also okay with having a bit more rotation off throttle. Go down to stint 15. This time he's increased the rear wing even more. We're actually pretty close to original levels now. Slightly increased rear ride height. You tend to do this to maintain the same balance. So if you're going to increase the rear wing, you would increase the rake, the rear ride height, to effectively maintain the same aero balance but increase downforce overall. And we go down to 16, not completed a decent lap in this one. And then stint 17, now this is his eventual fastest lap. So this was obviously the setup that he was happiest with. And this time he's increased the rear toe in quite significantly. Now what this will do is further increase stability on throttle. So really that's what he's tried to do with the last few changes, and it's really manifested itself in faster lap times. And we can see here that he's finally into the 28s. He's now playing about with the differential going back to 100, because he's not sure if he's giving away time with that freer differential. On throttle he might have to have just a bit too much inside wheel spin. But as we can see here, these lap times are very good, but he hasn't managed to do a 28. I will say though that doing 3 29 flats in a row is very good indeed. Normally you would expect to see the second and third laps to be slightly slower than the first initial hot lap. So I think this setup, this final setup, might actually be the best one overall. And we can see that he's gone out for one final stint just to make sure. No changes, but he hasn't actually completed a lap. So that brings us to the end of the session. So I hope that was a helpful tutorial for you guys, and you're able to analyze a session in the same way in the future for your own benefit. Thanks for watching.